But as for the books on this field, you'll begin with the poem that we're studying here called Lamiyatul Ibn al-Wardi. And this is a good place to start. Either this or another one entitled Unwan al-Hikam. If you take a look at the curriculum set by our Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Qasim, there's a nice poem in there called Unwan al-Hikam, which is also suitable for beginning in this science. Eventually, you want to read all of these poems and all of these works in literature. You can move on to the Maqsura of Ibn Durayd. Then after that, a person can move on to Lamiyatul Arab by Shanfarah. And then after that, Lamiyatul Ajam by At-Tughra'i. After that, you will move on to that which is referred to as Al-Mu'allaqat al-Sab' or Al-Mu'allaqat al-Ashr. The scholars differ as to how many they were actually, but these are poems that were written before Islam. And we know the Arabs at that time, they were specialists in the Arabic language and they took pride in their poetry. So they would have battles, and those who had the best poetry, it would be written, bima al-dhahab, as they say, and it would be hung on the Kaaba during that time. Yeah, and it was a sense of pride and honor for them. These poems were considered to be the most eloquent of that time. Khayran. From them is the one Imrul Qais, قفا نبكي من ذكرى حبيب ومنزلي. You have طرف بالعبد لخولة أطلال ببرقة فهمدي. You have Zuhair ibn Abi Salma, Amin Ummi, Awfa, Dimnatun, Lam Takallami, Antara bin Shaddad, beautiful poetry. هل غادر الشعراء من متردم لبيد بن ربيعة عفت الديار محلها فمقامها الأعشى ودع هريرة إن الركب مرتحل, etc. And you have others as well. But those are the beginnings of how their poems began started. Beautiful poems filled with balagha and eloquence and how they express different meanings. SubhanAllah bihamdi, it'll open your heart and it'll, and you literally cry because some the stories are really sad. And it takes you through a roller coaster and it affects the heart. Now, of course, nothing compares to the Quran, but it's just something to help you understand how one vocabulary, two tarakib jumal, how sentences are formed, and the balagha within it trains you. Okay, so then when you read the Quran, subhanAllah, you realize how masterful the Quran is. By studying these poems, right? And this is supposed to be the epitome of the language during that time. And then you read the Quran, subhanAllah, you truly recognize the beauty of the Quran. We hear often the Quran is eloquence, right? And we see examples how the people praise the Quran, like Al-Walid, when he said about the Quran that is beautiful, etc., and sweet. When you read these poems, you understand these poems, and you compare it to the Quran, now you truly realize for yourself the eloquence of the Quran, the beauty of the Quran, the superiority of the Quran. Now, so these are just a suggestion in how you should study poems on this field. And there's also other works you should know as well and study and read. You should be familiar with at the very least, like Al-Iqd al-Farid by Ibn Abdi Rabbih al-Andalusi, who died 328 years after Hijrah. He has a book called Al-Iqd al-Farid. And what he did here, rahimahullah, was gather all the most famous poems that came before him, the most eloquent poems, and that were the most famous, and he gathered them in this one book. Now, also, it's not a poem, but it's a book authored by Ibn Qutaybah called Uyun al-Akhbar. It's filled with adab as well. There's chapters related to adab in there. Also, there's a work, a poem called Diwan al-Hamasa by Abu Tammam. Beneficial poetry about courageousness, etc., and many other attributes. Also, you have a work called Zahratul Adab by Abu Ishaq al-Husri al-Qayrawani, died 453 years after Hijrah. Something that you should read. Also, Maqamat al-Hariri. Okay, this is one of the more beneficial works for vocabulary and tarakib al-Jumal and balagha, and more specifically mufradat, matn al-lugha, yani vocabulary. Also the poems by Abu Tayyib al-Mutanabbi. Al-Mutanabbi, he has beautiful poetry as well. Also, you have written works. I mentioned earlier Uyun al-Akhbar. Another written work is by Al-Jahid al-Mu'tazili. He has works that are very eloquent and beneficial in al-adab. He was Mu'tazili in Aqidah, Okay, so a person must be wary of this. And some of these works, yani, should only, obviously, if you're studying these works, you should reach a certain level in knowledge. طيب? Especially works by Al-Jahiz and other people, other poets, it should be read by experts in Aqidah so that they're able to differentiate between that which is Iman and Kufr. Yani, some of these poetry, there's Kufr in it. Like Al-Burda. Everyone knows Burda by Al-Busiri? Anyone ever heard of this poem? If you're from the subcontinent, you should be well aware of this poem, right? This is what they teach in some of the madaris over there. This filled with shirk, billah, attributing aspects of rububiyyah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Naam, it's filled with shirk. So a person who reads this poem has to have a strong basis in aqidah, so as to point out the errors, right? Al-Jahid, he was a Mu'tazili in aqidah, and they have serious, dangerous beliefs. But his works in Arabic language are strong in terms of the way he wrote. Like Al-Bayan wa Tabyin, one of his more beneficial works in the Arabic language. These are some works you should be aware of and you should go through at some point. Also, there are dawaween, there are poetry from the Sahaba as well. The Sahaba were known for poetry. Like, for example, Diwan Ali ibn Abi Talib, he was known for his poetry. Radiallahu anhu. Hassan bin Thabit, he was known for his poetry. Abdullah bin Rawaha, he was also known for his poetry. Even among the Salaf, among the more famous ones, Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he has his own diwan. It's a collection of his poems.